In the quiet suburbs of a sprawling city, where the streets were lined with neatly trimmed hedges and the houses stood as symbols of middle-class stability, there lived a man named Robert Davis. Robert, a successful businessman in his mid-40s, had built a comfortable life for himself and his family through years of dedication and hard work. His wife, Sarah, was a graceful woman, devoted to their home and two young children. They lived in a large, tastefully decorated house, the kind that exuded warmth and security. Despite their seemingly perfect life, cracks had begun to form in their marriage over the years. Cracks that neither Robert nor Sarah had fully acknowledged or addressed. Robert's long hours at the office, the growing distance between them, and the lack of meaningful communication had all contributed to an unspoken rift. Sarah, who had once been the center of Robert's world, now found herself feeling lonely and disconnected. As the years passed, the passion that had once fueled their relationship had waned, replaced by a routine that felt more like a partnership of convenience than a marriage built on love and mutual respect. It was during this time that Maria, a young woman in her late 20s, entered their lives as a housekeeper. Maria was a hard-working, attractive woman who had come to the city seeking better opportunities to support her family back in her rural hometown. She was diligent, efficient, and soon became an indispensable part of the Davis household, taking care of the cleaning, cooking, and other household chores with a level of care and attention that Sarah greatly appreciated. However, beneath Maria's quiet demeanor lay a woman who, like Sarah, had her own struggles and unfulfilled desires. She had left behind a life of hardship, and while she had hoped to find a better life in the city, the reality of her situation was far from what she had imagined. Living alone in a small, cramped apartment, Maria felt isolated and homesick, yearning for the companionship and affection that her life lacked. She was often drawn to the Davis household, not just because it was her place of employment, but because it offered her a glimpse into a life of comfort and security that she had always dreamed of but never had. Robert, who was increasingly spending more time at home due to a shift in his work responsibilities, began to notice Maria in a way he hadn't before. At first, it was merely the occasional glance or a passing thought, but as time went on, those thoughts began to linger longer in his mind. Maria's presence, her warmth, and her quiet strength began to stir something within him that he hadn't felt in years. He found himself drawn to her, seeking out opportunities to engage her in conversation, to hear about her life, and to simply be near her. Maria, for her part, was flattered by the attention. She had always been aware of the distance between Robert and Sarah, and while she respected their marriage, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement at the prospect of someone as successful and attractive as Robert taking an interest in her. What began as innocent interactions soon evolved into something more. It started with small gestures. Robert offering to drive Maria home on rainy days, lingering conversations in the kitchen after the children had gone to bed, and the occasional touch that seemed to linger a little longer than necessary. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a growing tension that neither could deny. Sarah, meanwhile, was oblivious to the developing connection between her husband and their housekeeper. She was preoccupied with managing the household, taking care of the children, and trying to find ways to rekindle the spark in her marriage. She had noticed Robert's changing behavior, his sudden attentiveness to his appearance, the way he seemed more engaged and present when he was home, but she attributed it to the positive changes in his work-life balance. She didn't suspect that there could be another woman involved, least of all Maria, whom she trusted implicitly. As the weeks turned into months, the tension between Robert and Maria reached a boiling point. They both knew that what they were feeling was wrong, that crossing the line would have devastating consequences, but the pull of their mutual attraction was too strong to resist. One evening, after Sarah had gone out for a rare night with her friends and the children were asleep, Robert and Maria found themselves alone in the house. The air was thick with anticipation, and as they stood in the kitchen talking, the unspoken desires that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long finally erupted. Robert leaned in, his heart pounding in his chest, and kissed Maria. It was a moment of weakness, of giving in to the forbidden, and yet it felt inevitable. Maria, though initially shocked, responded in kind, the loneliness and yearning she had felt for so long pouring out in that single reckless act. What followed was a night that neither Robert nor Maria would ever forget. They crossed the line they had both feared and desired, succumbing to the passion that had been building between them. In the quiet of the house, they found solace in each other, a brief escape from the realities of their lives. But as the night wore on, the weight of what they had done began to settle in. They knew they had betrayed Sarah, that they had shattered the trust that had been placed in them, and that there would be no turning back. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the connection they had forged. In the days that followed, the affair continued in secret. Robert and Maria were careful, always aware of the risk they were taking, but the thrill of the forbidden kept drawing them back to each other. They would steal moments whenever they could, always careful to keep their relationship hidden from Sarah. But secrets, especially ones as explosive as theirs, have a way of coming to light. Sarah's suspicions began to grow as she noticed small changes in Maria's behavior. The way she seemed more distracted, the way she avoided eye contact, and the way she seemed to be in a hurry to leave whenever Robert was around. It wasn't long before Sarah began to piece together the clues, her heart sinking as she realized the truth. The final blow came one afternoon when Sarah returned home unexpectedly from a shopping trip, having forgotten her wallet. She entered the house quietly, not wanting to disturb Maria, who she assumed would be cleaning upstairs. As she made her way to the bedroom, she heard the unmistakable sound of voices coming from within. Curious and growing more suspicious, she moved closer, her heart pounding in her chest. What she saw when she pushed open the door would haunt her for the rest of her life. There, on the bed she shared with her husband, were Robert and Maria, caught in an intimate and compromising position. The shock and betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her world came crashing down around her as she realized that the man she had loved and trusted, the man she had built a life with, had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. The pain was unbearable, but so was the anger that quickly followed. Unable to contain herself, Sarah screamed at them, her voice trembling with rage as she confronted them. The confrontation was explosive, with emotions running high as the truth of the affair was laid bare. Robert, caught in the act, could do nothing but confess, while Maria stood by, tears streaming down her face, knowing that she had destroyed the trust and respect that Sarah had once had for her. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Sarah, heartbroken and furious, demanded that Maria leave the house immediately and told Robert that their marriage was over. The once happy home was now filled with tension and sorrow as the reality of the betrayal set in. Robert, filled with guilt and regret, tried to apologize, to explain that it had been a moment of weakness, that he still loved Sarah, but his words fell on deaf ears. Sarah couldn't look at him without feeling the pain of his betrayal, and she couldn't forgive him for what he had done. Maria, too, was left to face the consequences of her actions. She lost her job and the home that had provided her with security and stability. But more than that, she lost the respect and trust of the woman who had once been kind to her. As she packed her belongings and left the Davis household, she couldn't help but wonder what had driven her to make such a destructive choice, and whether she would ever be able to forgive herself. The story of Robert, Sarah, and Maria is one of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of infidelity. It serves as a reminder that even the strongest relationships can be torn apart by secrets and lies, and that the choices we make in moments of weakness can have far-reaching and irreversible consequences. As Sarah began the painful process of rebuilding her life, she knew that she would never be the same, that the trust she had once had in Robert was gone forever, and that the scars of his betrayal would remain with her for the rest of her life. Robert, too, was left to live with the consequences of his actions, knowing that he had lost not only his marriage, but also the respect and love of the woman he had once cherished. And Maria, now alone and without a job, was left to face the reality of what she had done, knowing that her actions had caused irreparable harm to a family that had once welcomed her into their home.